Hey everybody, welcome. It's Cole Harmonson with Dare Capital, and you know what time it is for the Dare Capital Dialogues this week, brought to you along with Mobilization Funding and Dare Capital, which both of us provide capital on manufacturing and construction projects. Today, we are joined by Stephen Shang and Robert Conley. They are both longtime entrepreneurs in this space and have a wealth of experience operating, running, growing, selling businesses. And today we're going to talk about what's going on with the changes in the space regarding pre-COVID, post-COVID, how you can deal with it. So we're very excited to have these guys joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started with the background. We're going to start with Mr. Stephen. Tell us a little bit about your illustrious background and how you went from Silicon Valley into the current business that you are running today. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. So thank you for hosting this. It's really an honor to be on here. And hello to all the participants. Hope everyone's doing well. So my background, I came out of school, went to a management consultancy, but then got the startup bug. And so went to Silicon Valley and we started pretty much about 7 different companies and raised about $90 million in equity capital, pissed it all away. And all I have to show for it is a picture of me with blue hair. But in 2002, came back to Austin and said, look, can we really build a real business? And we thought about a lot of different industries, and we saw the portable storage industry as a very interesting space. So we started Falcon Storage in 2003, and that was really just buying containers and renting them out for $125 a month or so. My VC friends were joking at the time, like, oh, wow, Falcon Storage, is that gigabyte or terabyte technology? Like, yeah, guy, it's cubic feet. But then over time, that portable storage business evolved into what it is today, which is Falcon Structures. As we worked with containers more and more, shipping containers, we found that there was a lot of applications for them in building them into workspaces, living spaces, equipment enclosures. And so we really transformed the company from just a little portable storage company to now a manufacturing company that serves pretty much the entire US, Caribbean, and Africa.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for that. Robert, tell us about yourself.
I refer to myself as a mutt. I bought my first business at 21, owned it for 6 years, kind of went on to help other companies grow. Sales and marketing is kind of the base of my background. Went back to business school at 37, which is a little bit rare for most people. Got what I consider to be a great education. Went on to apply that education with and I give this gentleman I state his credentials to give him respect and to kind of help folks understand how close to the heartbeat I felt like I was. But I went to work for a gentleman named Dr. Jim Ashton. Jim's a PhD from MIT in structural mechanics and a Harvard Baker Scholar. And he started the F-16 fighter program for General Dynamics and, produced the most defect-free, on-budget, on-time airplanes that have been produced, and he took that formulation and kind of created a management framework and tools around that. And when I went to work for Jim, we were doing private equity LBOs, kind of in the industrial space, job shop manufacturing, and we applied those tools and principles throughout. And because we were a small group, we did not only the kind of financial engineering, but we worked with executives, took executive positions within the companies and to get them turned. And we typically brought under-managed businesses. So super cool environment to take that business school knowledge, kind of an entrepreneurial background, and then really refine it with a brilliant individual over, a 10-year period. And so we were industry agnostic as long as it was complicated. And so with a gentleman like Jim, he said to me one time, he said, I can do the most complicated math formulas in the world, Robert, but unfortunately it's really not that valuable unless you're solving that specific problem. He said, because people don't do complex and they don't do fast. And so we typically were dumbing down manufacturing complexity into simplicity which is a challenge. And so, that's really what I've been doing. I just finished a turnaround. My actually partner's doing that. He's the CEO now. And this stuff works. It's very, very effective. And so that's quickly how I got to where I am at this moment.
Awesome. Well, great. We look forward to digging into some of that as we go along here. We're also going to have an audience poll today. So I know the audience has been growing and you just joined us today. We're talking about planning for the future in terms of what's going on in manufacturing. And we want you to take full advantage. Everyone now is Zoom efficient these days. We want you to take full advantage of the chat function, lob questions. We want this to be a participatory exercise, so please feel free to join in. And we are going to have a poll question here in terms of what you think is the peak of disruption behind us, and maybe not what we wish to have happen, but what we believe is going on. Yes, the peak is behind us, or no, it's not, or man, we don't know, you're not sure. So feel free to join in that poll, and we'll talk about that at the end as well. But thank you guys all for being here. And again, please feel free to use that chat function liberally, as I've got my partner, Casey Conlon, on the ready for questions. So thank you guys very much. So let's talk about before COVID. Let's talk about some of the biggest challenges in manufacturing. Let's start with you, Stephen. Tell us, what you think is going on and what was going on sort of before all of this disruption happened.
Yeah, for us, before all this disruption happened, I think our biggest challenge was really, like Robert was saying, more of a sales and marketing challenge. We had a certain physical plant that we had built up, and the question was how do we utilize that to the highest level of efficiency and really grow into this niche that we're filling with container-based structures. And so a lot of head scratching was really focused on sales and marketing and how to dominate those markets.
Gotcha. Robert, same question.
So one of the tenants that we work with, and by the way, I forgot to say thank you for having me and welcome to everybody. I haven't done a lot of these, so I get a little bit lost sometimes. So in manufacturing, long supply chains are ugly supply chains. And I think there's been a pretty consistent misunderstanding that low price is the siren song that you're after. And what we have believed, and typically we wouldn't choose a overseas supplier if we could avoid it, even if you pay a little bit more. And so I think that pre-COVID, the universe was working on what I consider to be a flawed principle of long supply chains and low price are what you should be pursuing. And what you really should be pursuing, at least from our perspective, is a close supplier that can satisfy you in short lead times with relative values of inventory at a competitive price. And by doing that, you effectively flush the system of working capital a bit and reduce inventories. You do a lot of really cool things for your business. And so I think, if you look at manufacturing today, that probably is one of the opportunities that pre-COVID wasn't really being viewed or looked at. And post-COVID or during COVID is in, a high level of scrutiny right now because of the disruption and the inability to actually deliver products that you're relying on those long supply chains to bring to you.
So for those of us who are not familiar with some of this industry jargon regarding long supply chains, could you just flesh that out just a little bit for us?
Sure. Well, I can probably give you an example. In the last company that I was running, we bought finished product from India and China. And as we strategized in this 50-year-old family-run business that we were doing a turnaround in, what the premise was is how do we buy our fabric product, because we had manufacturing in Mexico, closer to the heartbeat. You can buy it pretty cheaply in India, but if you looked at the unit economics, Jim always said raw material costs are not that materially different between, even if it's high volume, not between manufacturers. And so what we did is we went to try to work with a fabric supplier in Mexico versus buying that same fabric from a supplier we were getting finished product from in India. And what we found is that the costs, our price for that product, weren't materially different. And if you look at the long supply chain, so if you go FOB or Ex Works India, you then start, so you got to pay for something, Ex Works India, on their dock. Now you start a 34 to 45 day process of moving that material to you. Well, now my cash is being used in that process. And so it really fundamentally, if I compress that down to effectively my backyard, I reduce the risk. What if my container falls off the ship, as an example? Now, does it happen very often? No, but does it happen? Yes. What if they're late? Well, all of these things add risk to you being able to supply your customer with their finished product, if it's a value add component that you're buying, or the finished product if you're buying it. And so that risk is not preferable if you can avoid it at relative costs of supply. Did I say that clearly enough?
I think so. Stephen, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if you share that same philosophy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the differences.
No, I think Robert's encapsulated it pretty well. But yeah, long supply chains are ugly supply chains. I would totally agree with that.
Got it. And do we think that sort of post-COVID look at reality is just because of all, I know, the sort of the nationalistic sentiment that I think is going on across the world now? Do we think that is going to substantially change? Or how do you guys think about that problem now?
I mean, so our raw materials are shipping containers, right? So it's not the stuff inside the shipping containers, but we need a consistent flow of shipping containers coming in from Asia, from Africa, from wherever. And I'll say, you know, if all you believed was kind of the news and the nationalistic kind of news that they're reporting on and all that, you would think that shipping has ground to a halt. But based on our data, it slowed a little bit when COVID first hit, but now it's back to kind of the levels that we're used to, albeit prices are a little bit higher, but I wouldn't say they're so much higher that we can't absorb those costs or pass those costs on to the customer.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. I have a client in the Port of Los Angeles who does nothing but shipping containers. And there was a dip in volume, but it's back now. Although I feel like there's more diversification, and I'd like to just get your thoughts on how someone could diversify in their supply chain if you know they were relying on China. Will that still be the case? You know, as going forward, you know, what will the relationship with China kind of morph into, if any, changes?
Robert, you want to take that one?
So I got a LinkedIn question from a woman who's making garments the other day, and she was wanting to move her manufacturing back to the U.S. And what I would say is still consistent with what I said earlier, which is, textiles left the U.S. and probably rightfully so. There was organizational structures, unions, different things caused prices to increase on a labor basis. But if you look at our neighbor, Mexico, the unit economics, and I believe strongly in unit economics, the unit economics of Mexico are not dissimilar from China. The capabilities of Mexico are very strong, and the ability to move supply chains from a long distance to a near distance with preferable tariff structures, et cetera, is very available. Now, is there a risk and is there a concern with being able to assess those supply chains? And I would say yes. All suppliers are not created equal and promise a lot, deliver very little sometimes. But I think that China could be displaced in certain realms. Not all, because they're very good at many things and very fast, and governmentally sponsored to invest in infrastructure that other companies, because capitalist structures are not. So it depends, but yes, it's very possible. What we would call high tolerance industries, something where you're using a micrometer or where, fractions of a hair distance between panels or parts matter, those could return to the U.S. in a nanosecond. The oil industry has had some experience with those things. It's really a matter of being able to support that. I think that some people will find hard to figure out. I don't know if I answered that correctly or not, or clearly.
There's no wrong answers here at the Dare Capital Dialogue, so thank you. Thank you.
Well, I would add that to that too. I mean, yes, there definitely is risk of trade war kind of sitting out there. And as a Chinese American who grew up in Oklahoma, my perspectives probably don't represent the majority. But I'm reminded of my daughter about 2-3 years ago was starting to learn how to read. And she just kind of is looking at me and said, "Dad, why does it say everything is made in China?" Right? And I mean, it's legitimate if you think about it. And so if we're really going to kind of take all these different supply chains where we have so much product flowing into our country, so much capital flow in there, and then some product is going back as well, I mean, it would be extremely difficult to pull the two countries apart to really disrupt kind of international shipping at that level.
Yeah, and not to have a moral component about this. That's not the conversation. But is there the move to American manufacturing? Is your take on that it's more hype than anything else, or will we onshore? Will that actually happen, or can it even happen? And if so, then what's kind of the time frame?
So I can speak about containers in itself. Like, to manufacture a container in the U.S. with U.S. labor and U.S. steel, is probably 2 to 2.5x what it costs to do in China. So the question then is, does that even make sense? And can we catch up to that kind of productivity and cost gap? I think it would be extremely difficult. I think the onshoring of manufacturing that we're seeing, like Robert's saying, is really for some pretty technical, high value add type products. And China, and then India for that matter, will continue to produce some of the more commoditized type items.
Got it. Any follow on there, Robert?
So my belief is that humans are a bell-shaped curve, and we revert to the mean over and over, meaning that we try to learn from history or current experience, and then we return to the crimes we're comfortable with. The reason that Jim Ashton liked job shop manufacturing is because he liked solving complex problems. And I would submit that growing a manufacturing base in the US is a challenge, very doable, but that for the most part, the human component will cause themselves to want to do something and then actually return to what's comfortable and familiar versus taking the longer road, which is changing their paradigm. I think it'll happen in certain instances, opportunistically, but broadly speaking, I hope I hope for Mexico, because I like Mexico and I like the environment. You can do a lot there that they benefit. If they're smart, they will work on that. But broadly speaking, I think Stephen's correct. It's not likely to be disrupted on the whole.
Gotcha.
Stephen, there's a question here from the audience asking, you mentioned there's 2 to 2.5 times the cost for those containers. What's driving that cost increase?
I think part of it is just we don't have steel foundries in the U.S. to really spit out the kind of steel that you need to build containers with. And then the other component of that is just the labor rates there are just insanely low, and it's not a complex weld that you have to put on it, and so they're able to achieve the big cost savings. So both material and labor.
Got it.
Yeah, I also think from a Chinese perspective, one of the things that people don't weigh in enough in relation to that is the government sponsorship of the companies that are producing the products, whether it be steel, labor, robots, because I would argue that a lot of those containers are probably made with robotic welds. And so, the ability to set up a robotic line, robotic tooling line that's 100 yards long with the government paying for a good portion of it, well, that company doesn't have the same unit economics or economics that a U.S. company or any other company would have. And so you've got a strong imbalance in understanding why that's true, and an unnatural scenario with Chinese governmental support skewing what would otherwise be very challenging on a capitalistic basis or free markets basis from a supply chain standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And I think kind of following up a little bit different tack, you mentioned obviously the Chinese government subsidies help lower their costs. We have another audience member asking, the NAFTA agreement's been in the news, or the rewrite lately. Have you seen any effect on that because of COVID, talking specifically US to Canada or US to Mexico, the effects there?
I don't do that much business with Mexico or Canada. So Robert, if you have an answer to that, I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, we bought we had about 700 employees in Mexico, very aware of the NAFTA agreement, and really the new NAFTA is a very positive thing for all parties, let's just say. It still has the good effects in it. There were some aspects that, the government was trying to kind of unweight it, if you will, to have Mexico kind of support some of its own costs in certain ways. But, we bought a company a Mexican company in 2019 as a vertical integration play, and phenomenal, great investment, great conditions, plenty to work with. I strongly recommend and am in support of strengthening the North American continent between all three parties.
And how do you feel, talking about the China trade deal as a follow-on, do you feel like that will get done, or how do you plan for that?
Again, I don't have a strong background in that either. Apologies, Casey.
No, it's all right, Stephen. Robert, you're on the hot seat, I guess.
No, it's okay. I mean, look, I love business. I don't care what this stuff is. So I love it. I spend a lot of time in lots of different aspects of it, but I think you got to helicopter out on the Chinese deal and take a longer term perspective of what's occurring globally, whether you talk about oil reserves, arguing about islands. I think there's some aspects of the Chinese agreement that are more about leverage over the long term, not about the current scenarios. And The Chinese have a very long-term perspective of what they're accomplishing, and the U.S. is not as good at that and needs to be better at it. But you're talking about global superpower changing the economic landscape, globally speaking. And GDP right now is redistributing itself on a global basis. And they're trying to siphon off as much of that GDP as is possible, you know, as it kind of changes the places that it goes. You got to watch out for China. I mean, bottom line, you got to watch out for China.
Awesome. Well, thanks. That's your answers have definitely been helpful, Robert. Appreciate it. We've got some more audience questions that we're gonna go with. So kind of jumping in here, you had mentioned, Robert, earlier the government sponsorship with in China. Do you see any role of for U.S. defense, either the Department of Defense or any other organization in this, in terms of U.S. government sponsorship?
I'm not sure I understand that question well enough to answer it. Tell me more.
Well, I'll see if Jason is listening, maybe he can chime in. So I'll read it just straightforward. It says, speaking of government sponsorship, do you see any role for U.S. defense in this?
Okay, I might be able to take a stab at that.
Yeah.
You know, we have traditionally done a lot of work with the Department of Defense. And what we have seen is like some of these very large prime contractors, defense contractors, they become part of this kind of industrial military complex where they're just intertwined with the government, and you see people kind of leaving the government and going to work for these companies immediately, right? And so we may not call it sponsorship here in the U.S. in the same way that, you know, China, when you start a business, the government really is a second or third partner in that business. But I do think there is quite a bit of support for these, especially these defense contractors that are part of that complex.
That's a good thing. So let's talk about, and by the way, I know we were, I think we had this plan for 30 minutes and I knew it would go longer. I just want to let everybody know, if you do have to jump off, you will be able to find this on YouTube on the Dare Capital channel on YouTube, or you can find it in my Twitter feed at Cole Does Capital. And then we can also send out a link to everyone just in case you have to jump off. But our audience seems to be growing, not shrinking over time. So this is a really great discussion. We want to keep going. Thinking about sort of with COVID situation where we are today, what do you guys think the biggest challenges are for operators to think about? And then what are the steps that these operators can take in order to mitigate some of these challenges? So problem and solution with COVID. So maybe Stephen, you want to kick us off on that one?
Sure. I would say, you know, as we've thought about it as a leadership team at Falcon, I think the number one challenge that we see out there is worker health, right? And so obviously on the manufacturing floor, as we're still running, you know, how do you keep everyone healthy? How do you keep everyone productive? How do you maintain the levels of efficiency or increase from there when you have to socially distance? Those are kind of the more obvious answers, but there's also the aspect of worker health for the office staff or the overhead in a manufacturing organization, because a lot of those folks start working from home to protect the worker safety on the manufacturing floor, and they become untethered. And so you really wonder about the mental health of those employees. How do you keep them engaged and all that? And I think the opportunity there that we really seized upon is to really up our game as far as transparency goes. And I think in the last 90, 120 days since all this has been happening, I think with that heightened transparency, you know, really sitting down, laying out what is the 90-day plan, all the things that you and I learned in EO, Cole, you know, we're really applying in spades now and really being intentional about it versus pre-COVID, you kind of took all that stuff for granted to some extent, like, oh yeah, business is great, but now really focusing on worker health has become the opportunity. And I think the companies who do that well, who can demonstrate leadership, can demonstrate transparency, because really nobody has the answers. And as a leader, you'd be faking it if you said you did. I think that's really going to separate a lot of winners and losers in this environment.
I feel like I'm always faking it, but okay. I know. I love that. I love that on the mental health side. I'm curious on that. It's a very personal area for people even to admit. So I applaud you for jumping in on that and just even acknowledging folks, because I mean, what I've seen, and again, we talk to lots of employees, if you just count all the folks that we talk to, and, anxiety, fear, people's, job security, there's a lot of processing, if you will, that's happening with folks these days. And, sort of the tools for doing so are very limited, I would say, at a corporate level, or even folks even wanting to have that conversation just generally. So, the caring and the empathy piece, just to even quote unquote hold space for that is I think about 90% of it. But I'm just curious, how do you even get into that with your team?
So I would say there are two ways. One is pretty simple, and I think everyone could pull something like this off. But the second one I've had to be more intentional about. The first one, in the Rockefeller Habits, Vern Harnish talks about doing your 5-minute huddle every day. And typically we would do that with the office staff, which is about 25 folks. And we'd all get in the conference room and we'd do that. Well, when COVID hit, that was the last thing we were going to let go of, because that was just a daily rhythm, a daily habit that everyone kind of synced up, felt connected because of that. And so now that we're all virtual, we kind of go on Teams and we still do the same huddle. And, I spend 15 minutes before the huddle just prepping my mind to be upbeat, to be optimistic, to tell my funny dad jokes that aren't really that funny, right? Just to get that, so that when we do hit that, we kick off the day correctly and really come together once again, albeit through a different medium. The second one's been harder for me, but I'm sure you can relate. You kind of get into your daily routines and you have like a to-do list of 20, 25 tasks, and you get all these emails coming at you. Now people are pinging your Microsoft Teams, and just never seems enough time to do all the things you need to do. Well, 2 days a week I come to the factory and I actually make space in my schedule that's just white space, not to hit all those to-do list items, but to just walk around, go talk to the factory workers, spend time with them, ask them how they are, ask them how their family is, and not being in a rush about it, to genuinely care for those that you're responsible for. And we found that's, I think, really helped us kind of hold together that mental health piece, because they can tell me about their fears. They can tell me about what they're excited about, and that's been something that I've had to be disciplined about doing and not letting my day get away from me.
Wow, that's strong leadership. Very strong. I applaud that very much. But I think people need that, and I think people are looking for that sort of stability, if you will. So, Robert, how about you? What do you think are some of the biggest challenges, and how to mitigate those for operators going forward?
No, I agree with you. I hear those strong leadership tenets and connecting to people, and one of the things in the frameworks that I use is that really they're fundamentally about people, and so people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect in a non-punitive environment. So when you realize there's 168 hours in a week, and as a single individual, there's really not a lot you can do in those 168 hours that's going to truly drive your business forward. You realize quickly you need others, and so I think one of the things I'm proudest of most in most companies that I've ever taken over or been involved in is a cultural sea change related to what Stephen is getting at. And that's putting people in front of whatever the decisions are, whether it's guiding them, enabling them to understand what pieces they hold in the business and why it's important and how that work goes into each other. And, that transparency, we use a tool called Ops Review every month.
Did you say that again? The tool?
Ops Review. It's basically where, CEO, COO, CFO, et cetera, come together. Every department presents kind of where they are, what they're working on, challenges they're having, successes. And what happens is the organization begins to see each other. And when an organization sees each other, that empathy begins to grow within the organization, not just for the work and the customer, but for each other and how they fit into each other. And the leader, we have another saying is fish think from head down. and so in Stephen's case, the fish is doing, great things and helping people feel connected to the business. And that's a missing piece in a lot of cases, at least from our experience in taking undermanaged companies. And so I completely agree. Transparency, consistency, being patient, being tolerant, understanding, caring about others, those parts of business are not well formed enough, nor are they pushed enough in the business environment, because leaders get locked into their egos, or they get locked into the mission, or they get scared, or they've over forecasted, or whatever it is. And I'll touch on this, which is if you go on CNBC and you pay attention to the companies that are reporting and the things that are happening in the universe related to COVID, forecasting is so difficult right now. A black swan effect, no one's been through this. There isn't a way to get concrete about most of these things because it's like pushing down on a sponge. It's going to pop out in different areas, and so it may not be the right visual. But these things are really challenging right now, and being patient with the team or the organization to know that this too shall pass. But people are doing the best they can right now. I mean, in a lot of cases, I think that's all you can do. Forecasting is very challenging right now for all companies. From every single thing that I hear, have conversations about, and understand. I don't care what size you are.
Yeah, I'd love to, if you don't mind, to type in that link into the chat for the panelists, and we'll get that published out. That tool you mentioned sounds like something that everybody could benefit from. In terms of, we got an audience question here around challenges. A quick overview of the cost of goods increases due to logistic issues. And what is the plan to keep that low?
We've not seen dramatic price increases on our raw materials. We have seen it kind of shipping the final product via truck. That seems to have gone up slightly, but I think that's being offset somewhat by the price of fuel going down as well. So it's not something that we've identified as a big threat. If it does increase, we will definitely just increase our prices and see if the market will bear that.
Yeah, spot rates I think have gone up just because there's been a lot of trucking companies and logistics businesses in the U.S. that have gone out of business because of too much supply. So also, this is specifically for you, Stephen, regarding, I know you mentioned earlier, sort of pre COVID, that your challenge was on the sales and marketing side. Is it more of a challenge now, and how have you worked with that?
Is it more of a challenge? I would say it's a different kind of challenge. I wouldn't say it's more or less of a challenge. It's a different kind of challenge. Before it was really a big part of our business was exposed to oil and gas, And with kind of COVID hitting and then the price of crude oil going negative and everything like that, a lot of the oil and gas market is just a bloodbath. But, there are two challenges we presented to our team in the first 90 days. And one is like, okay, we've been hit by COVID. We've got a product that can be applied to a lot of different industries. Can we pivot to some industry that may be using container-based structures? And if so, how do we go after them? How do we develop the products and all that? And then the second thing is one of our other themes was sharpen the saw. And that one was much easier to implement in the sense that, okay, we're pretty good at what we do, but you know what? If you're sitting around at home and you have to do sales and marketing, sometimes it's really hard to get inspired to make those calls or to really write that content. How can we sharpen the saw? And so we really revved up the sales training in the first 90 days pretty dramatically and really focused in on that. Now in the first part of UK, so what else can we go after? My team was just blew me away because one, they said, okay, let's develop a COVID line of products, which are COVID testing labs, mobile hospital rooms, things like that you can put inside a container. And in a matter of, a few days, they came up with the draft of it. And in a few weeks, they had it fully published, all the marketing collateral. I'm like, why can't we do this in pre-COVID times?
Wow.
Right? And they came out with an amazing line and we were able to get that out to the industry. And we've seen some really good hits on that. But then the other one was the sales team. They really focused on listening to the customer more. And so, who's doing well in the COVID crisis? Well, grocery stores are doing well. Well, can't we do help them with curbside pickup because that's what they are needing? And so we've been building a lot of curbside pickup units to give grocery stores additional space for that. And so it's that, there's that saying that if you focus on problems, you're going to just come up with more problems. You're going to figure out why you can't succeed. But if you focus on opportunities, well, then when luck hits, you're going to be ready to take that, right? And so I think our team has done just a fantastic job on keeping their head up and focusing on what opportunities are really out there.
Love that. I love that. So to kind of sum up regarding challenges and mitigation around those, and I'm curious if you guys have anything else to add, but really it sounds more like personnel issues. I won't call it HR, but I'll call it culture, and being able to listen, being able to care, show empathy, and being able to, actually do something about that and deliver to your team, which is always a challenge. But I guess what I'm hearing you say, both of you say, is that most of the issues are centering around, caring for the people on your team. Is that a good summation? And anything else to add before we kind of move on to what are the opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, if you really kick it up to a whole nother level on the caring for the people on your team, when COVID first hit, I think a lot of us were confronted with a choice because we didn't know how bad it was going to get or how long it was going to take. Maybe we should just hunker down and shut down or lay off a bunch of people and all that, right? I mean, those were decisions that we as presidents, CEOs were faced with. And I really did a lot of soul searching in that, I love my people. And what's the best way to care for them? We're going to stay open, right? We're just going to go for broke. If it's going to last for a long time and whatever, but that's going to be the most important thing we focus on. And fortunately it worked out for us, but there could have been the scenario where it would have just been, we all crashed and burned.
Yeah.
I will say that, and again, I applaud Steve. It sounds like what a great guy and a great guy to work for, and those are the case. So that's a beautiful thing to hear. I would say because I'm a bit different in that I've entered companies that are broken most of the time, and most of the time what we say is that we're freeing the employees from their captors, and COVID, from my perspective, is an emergency response to something that should be consistent throughout. And so I don't give, sometimes I say things very candidly, and I apologize if that's harsh, but I don't give leaders a lot of credit for responding to something they should be doing all the time. And, in the emergency, because every single thing, an organizational chart ultimately is about operating leverage. And the better that the individuals feel connected to and otherwise understand the box that they're in on that org chart, and the better the leader works with them and connects to them, the more that structure, because that's what it's called, an organizational structure, is able to produce more. And ultimately, it is literally about the human inside the box. And so, I brought donuts and coffees and tacos, on Fridays myself, stopping by the store. These connections to humans is what people get pissed off about every single day in business. Every single day. They're underpaid, they're undervalued, they're not communicated with. And so when a leader steps into that particular position and is patient and understanding and guides humans to the targets that businesses are trying to achieve, amazing things happen, both in their personal lives and in the company's life. And so whether it's COVID or it isn't COVID, I think leaders have to look at themselves very distinctly and do more of what Stephen's doing and get out of themselves and into their people. My karate instructor said, don't, put your ego in your back pocket and let's go to work. And you got to care for your people. So COVID can be an excuse for those things, but the bottom line is these things should be happening and should have been happening for a long period of time and need to continue to happen regardless of the emergency that's in front of us.
Agree 100%. And I just have to throw this out there as we've been doing these Dare Capital dialogues and discussions with leaders across various industries / things we're interested in. One of those things is culture, communicating with your team. I would say I'm going to throw out 3 sort of tools here, I think, that are helpers in accomplishing the things you guys have been mentioning. One is Workify. That's an Austin-based company here that it's a sort of listening tool to measure culture, to actually help you put some teeth behind some of the things that you put forth in your culture. That's at Workify. And then we had Rob Lynch on and talking about the Rockefeller Habits. So a lot of folks have heard about that, and there's a book. And then the tool set that we use is called chorus.com, KHORUS.com. And that tool is meant to help you keep some of those rocks that you establish in your Rockefeller Habits present and communicated transparently across the team. And that's chorus.com as well. So as far as tools, at least for me as a leader, I need something concrete, so I can look to it and say, okay, we either are doing this or not. We're either listening or we're not. The thing I liked about Workify so much is that it has an anonymous feedback function. So people feel free to like, Cole, hey, you're full of shit. You said this, you did this, how did this all work out? So it just helps you kind of put some teeth behind it. I don't think we have any more open questions. I wanted to kind of move on to the opportunities that you guys see on the horizon that are coming up because of COVID specifically. What's on your mind as far as opportunities that are going to be occurring for folks and how to take advantage of those? Robert, you want to start?
I'm going to go back to forecasting. And, if you buy and sell companies, one of the things that private equity hates is, the 1% of a market share or et cetera. And what these things can cause us to go do is and I think Stephen said it a minute ago, which is we went back and tried to listen to our customers and hear them better. And what that really is related to is building it from the ground up. And, when you build a structure from the ground up, whether it's the weld strength, materials you use, or the humans that do that work to connect to the customers, the markets, I think that's probably one of the biggest opportunities to realize, oh crap, we win this or lose this one customer at a time, what is it that they want and need, and how do we forecast those needs and build them in? I think on my LinkedIn profile, I have a piece that Dr. Ashton wrote for Harvard related to understanding how deep you can go in your core business. Value is destroyed by moving outside of your core. But if you build your business up and you really focus on the customer, I think these are the opportunities and times we realize, oh crap, we didn't understand that very well. And there's a better way to understand it. In getting granular and knowing why people buy from you, what's important to them, what they care about, is a way to strengthen your business during a time of what we'll just call pandemonium, if that makes any sense.
Got it. Understood. Stephen, same question.
So we see plenty of opportunities in container-based structures, but I don't think that's interesting for the group as a whole. I think if we're speaking about manufacturing, like what opportunities are there in manufacturing? I see two global themes that we are positioning ourselves to capitalize on. The first one is counterparty risk. And I think with COVID, with companies going out of business and things like that, I think people who are looking for suppliers, looking for manufacturers, their purchasers, their CFO, all that, they have a heightened awareness of counterparty risk, which may not have existed in 2019 or 2018. And so being able to position a manufacturer as, hey, look, we're the guys you want to go to because we've been around and we're going to be around. We're going to take care of you. You're not going to have a disruption to your supply chain. I think that's a huge opportunity. And if companies that are healthy right now aren't trying to figure out a way to talk about how they're healthy and how they can help, supply the materials that their customers are wanting, that should be something that is, mission number one. The second one would be, the talent that is on the market right now. For example, one of the things that we just turned on the spigot on hiring is a director of sales. And I think during the kind of pre-COVID days, man, trying to get people to even apply for that was close to impossible. And our HR managers told me we've had like 30 applicants in the first 2 days, right? And half of those people are unemployed, unfortunately, and half of them actually are in current positions, but looking for a change because maybe they see the writing on the wall. So I think there's a huge opportunity to bring on some talent in kind of this time. And the question is, when do you do that from a capital conservation standpoint?
Got it. On the capital preservation, the counterparty risk, could you talk a little bit more about that? I don't know if I fully understand what you're saying there in terms of how to take advantage of that. How would one think about moving themselves there?
Yeah, so it really, the way that we've implemented at Falcon is twofold. One is what we've done is, in the last 4 years, we've really invested in being a thought leader, to use kind of a cliche term, in our industry. There aren't a lot of people thinking in the container-based industry, so it wasn't that hard to become a thought leader. But to position ourselves as the authority on a lot of the trends that are happening in the industry. The other part of it is to really demonstrate, hey, look, this is our track record. This is how we've responded in times of crisis. This is how we responded in COVID. And you know what? We're going to come out of this stronger. And that's more of a messaging type thing to potential customers, so that when they're looking at us versus, brand X, they're going to say, man, yeah, Falcon's more expensive, but brand X, I just don't have the confidence that they're going to be around to deliver on this entire project.
We've seen some opportunities come about because folks across the globe are now requiring cash up front. And so they can position themselves as almost distributors here in the US because other folks can't afford to put down the cash. And that's, again, what mobilization funding, they help sort of pre-invoice funding. Once it becomes an invoice, then, folks like us and asset-based lenders and factors can then, provide the working capital necessary. But I'm curious if you had seen any changes on the working capital side in terms of what folks are requiring, as you look at your vendor list.
I think people are much more understanding when we do charge people for, bigger deposits up front. But I do think there's a unique opportunity for folks like Dare to gain market share over like banks, because I think a lot of banks from a working capital funding standpoint, because they have to reserve that cash and they're less certain, that's leaving kind of a market gap for that type of an instrument.
Yeah, we've certainly seen more of that, and banks I think are going to be in risk off mode for the most part.
It's interesting. What you guys are really talking about is balance sheet strength, and balance sheets are not well understood by many people in business. And ratios and the ability to explain the value of those ratios, to Stephen's point about counterparty risk, what you're really asking is, can you sustain me? Are you going to fail? And the ability to illustrate a balance sheet strength position is a pretty powerful message to send when you're taking cash from customers. And it can, I think, I agree with Stephen completely, which is it actually can, if you can illustrate the strength of your balance sheet and why their cash is safe with you, really differentiate and give you probably that pricing power that, you can pay for certainty, kind of thing from a messaging standpoint. And so I think I applaud you for having that perspective on counterparty risk. That's a nuanced awareness of the market. And I, as you said, banks are risk off. Banks are always risk off. But if you understand the balance sheet and the nature of receivables, payables, and aging and different things of that nature, and inventory hold, and I mean, Christ Almighty, if you got a strong balance sheet, you have the potential to win big in this particular environment.
Got it.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I like me some balance.
It does. We've got a couple more questions here. We're gonna throw those in, and then we're gonna move to the last part, which is predictions and closing thoughts, just right after we answer these. You guys answer these questions.
So one question here. I know the four of us are all in Texas, but the question was what are your best, better, and then bad states to locate a company, specifically in manufacturing in the U.S.? Would you say here are the best, here's okay, and then don't locate here? A lot of laughter. I know we're all in Texas. Stephen, you want to?
I don't know if we can touch that question.
I think that's far too political of a statement. I'll just say there's a reason the Gigafactory is looking at, camping out two exits from us here at Falcon.
Got it. And Robert, I think your laughter says you're positioned pretty well here, so no worries there.
Here's the thing. 3,800 companies left California. 1,900 of them, I believe. You can check these statistics, and please don't, gig me if I'm completely out of line here. But I believe about a very large portion of those companies ended up in Dallas. Texas is, and I think what you're really talking about at the end of the day is regulations and business are like oil and water. And so when you find states, forget about political leanings, that welcome with low barriers, whether it be tax or otherwise, OSHA, socialistic perspectives, et cetera, on business, you can count on those environments being challenging and remaining challenging. Bottom line, I can tell you, I may be unpopular for that, but low regulations are your friend as it relates to business, and I'm not talking about disrupting the environment.
Casey actually changed the question, to be a little bit more politically correct, because it was, why is Texas so much better than every other state? So thank you for doing that very adeptly there, Casey. I think we got one other.
Yeah, we've got one last question, very specific. It says, I have to import or export lithium batteries in Japan. They're material safety data sheets. The form is still the same, but do you think because of COVID, they can be quarantined? I read this word for word, so.
I'm sorry, I have no expertise in neither of those things.
MSDS sheets, I mean, I'm not, so I think that anything, if coming from locations where infection rates are high, can be quarantined. I know that from an international import-export standpoint, just having played in those arenas, all materials that have caustics in them, as batteries do, will have import-export requirements based on every government that you're dealing with. And so I'm not sure I understand the question, but I mean, in these times, you can expect for governments to make knee-jerk reactions related to anything that they deem as being risk related.
We're gonna go lightning round here to you guys, which sounds fun. On predictions, and we've got a number of topics: supply chain diversification, Internet of Things, 3D printing, how to collaborate, workforce diversity. So, lightning round, supply chain diversification. Stephen, go.
It's good to keep your supply chain happy, and yes, we are looking for alternate sources. If we have any suppliers on here, watch out. But yeah, it's a good thing.
Got it.
Fundamentally, I believe in small numbers of suppliers with high concentrations with those suppliers that can prove they can deliver within the criteria. We have very specific criteria that we help them understand. Many companies will try to spread their purchases out in an attempt to get better pricing. We find that doesn't work, as well as concentrating purchases with competent, capable, proven companies.
Gotcha. Okay. On to Internet of Things. How is IoT going to change supply chain management, and how else will technology change in manufacturing operations from this? Stephen, you're first. Lightning round.
No strong opinions on that either way. Don't know.
That's a very fast answer. I can give you an example of a potential IoT effect in the last company that we were running. We were talking about putting RFID tags on the units that we were producing. If you think about as an example, if I've got a stack of material and I'm doing vendor managed inventory, where I want to be just in time once that stack shrinks to a certain point, being able to read when a bag or something leaves a stack and begins to travel. If you understand the count in that particular IoT environment and you have something that can track it, then you can be more just in time in that vendor managed inventory environment. Now, technologically speaking, it's somewhat complicated to set those environments up and can be cost intensive, but trackability in IoT ultimately, the windmill industry has saved a ton of money in IoT by understanding how parts degrade and maintenance, et cetera. There's a lot there, but infrastructure is typically the problem in getting IoT to the point of from concept to practical application. So beautiful pie in the sky. Think about it in the 2000s as being able to deliver the software that you could sell, and actually a company have the ability to make use of that software that they purchased, hopefully getting all this value from it. You got to mature into it. So IoT's got a future when it really gets recognized as industry specific, I think.
3D printing will lower the barrier of entry for new, less capital intensive manufacturing companies?
We are not currently using 3D printing. It's really hard to 3D print a container.
Good. I mean, come on, Stephen.
So matter of fact.
I know Evan Lewis is 3D printing concrete homes, but more power to him on that. But yeah, I don't think we can 3D print a shipping container.
Yeah, I had a quick discussion with a young man on 3D printing this week or last week maybe. 3D printing is just machining in a different form, and speed is critical. Specs are always critical. 3D printing has got to come a long way. In certain industries, perfectly valid, and in all industries, it's valid. The question is, what's the infrastructure cost set up to get 3D printers to produce at the rate that a company needs? Really, all you're talking about is displacing labor. And if you do your unit economics on it, it'll be viable in high tolerance environments, maybe more so than others. But it's a combination of machining and robotics, from that perspective, and certainly viable. But maturity is required and change is required in organizations to actually be able to benefit from it. And there's advancements happening, but they happen fast all the time.
Collaborations, as far as the industry partnerships with universities and others, is this going to spark new innovations, new ways of working together? Stephen, go.
Are they actually having school this fall?
I think they're all saying, yes, we're having school. And then at the last minute, they're going to flip over to, well.
I do think that there are a lot of great ideas that come out of universities. It's really like working with University of Texas. How do they have a technology transfer program and a licensing program that works for industry and works for academia? And so I think it's really university specific.
I spent time on the phone with a guy that's very engaged in material science a few days ago, a good friend of mine, and he actually works with universities, sits on multiple boards related to taking technology out of universities. And I think the focus on those products and those technologies that are coming out, and it was becoming larger. He said to me, there's been 1,000 research papers produced on a hydrophobic coating from universities in the last 48 months. So, universities are a very, very key part. Commercialization of those particular products is a challenge, and the manufacturing environment typically is going to be the place that those things take place. Manufacturing doesn't do hockey sticks. I think Stephen would attest to that. But universities have lots and lots to offer. It's the ability to understand how to commercialize those things that's the real challenge. But there are definitely people out there that are working with them and working on those things at this time.
Nice. Last lightning round question. Workforce diversity. How does a diverse workforce impact financial performance? No one wants to touch that one.
No. I mean, I'm pretty diverse myself. I just was hoping Robert would go first for once.
No, we're going to you.
Part of the philosophy, the frameworks and tools that I use, that we use, all humans are created intrinsically equal, 100%, period. However, in an organizational structure, you find, whether it be through pay scales or other ways of understanding people and their capabilities, you can look at diversity as being the thing you're after. But what an organization, and unfortunately, when you're a capitalistic society, which I would submit that economics drives the universe, period. Disconnect from that if you like. But an organizational structure should be agnostic to diversity, because what an organization is looking for is the best person for the role that is required to propel it forward. And as an organism, that is what an organization is. You want the health and well-being of the organism to be supported by every single box that you put into it, regardless of its diverse nature. Now, that may be very wrong from a political standpoint, but stack the deck with the best people you can find, regardless, and things end up happening in a very beautiful way. And again, all humans are intrinsically equal, deserve dignity and respect, and should be treated with the value that they bring, which is immense when you get the right person.
I think you're running for some.
That's awesome.
I think you're running for some sort of office. That was a great answer. Thank you for that, Stephen. Follow that up.
Beliefs, man. These are true beliefs. I don't care.
I mean, the only thing I could add to that, and Robert, that was masterful. Thank you. Thank you. The only thing I would add to that is, we've got about 80 employees at Falcon, and the way that it was just organically grown was it created a very diverse workforce. We have Hispanics, we have Blacks, we have women. I mean, it's just, we have me, right? So it's a very diverse workforce, not by design, but because that was kind of how it grew. I think how does a diverse workforce impact financial performance? I think when you build it like that, almost like a meritocracy, what Robert's saying, you're going to have a very good workforce and you're going to have a great financial performance. If you build your workforce purely for the sake of looking good or satisfying diversity requirements, then it will probably negatively impact financial performance. Not always, but it may do that, right?
You're such a bright guy. I mean, here's the thing. I believe what you're trying to do is get a company to mesh, right? And you're trying to get individuals to mesh. And what happens is that people are smart. They come to work to do good things. They want to be in a company that's doing good things. All of these are parts of these principles and components that we use in running a company. And so when you get a company, what you have is these individuals, and what they're doing is they're looking at each other. And they're always looking at each other. And so what they want is to know that you're trying to put them in connection with the best person on the other side of the work that can be put in. And so they know when you don't do that. And guess what happens? They separate. And so if they separate, do you get that structure to come together? No, you don't. And so we can kid ourselves into believing that we're going to do something for the betterment of the universe. But if economics are the driver, the world around, I don't care what country you're in, then, and look at all of the countries are trying to become capitalistic, but can't separate from socialistic tendencies. Well, the bottom line is it's about value. And the closer that you bring that lattice work together to support whatever it is that you're trying to do, the mission you're trying to accomplish, growth, high quality, whatever it is, you don't put the right person in there, forget about it. And every single person that's in that structure then begins to move, and guess what happens? They leave. Because you aren't guiding the organization to do something that is the best thing that you can do for each other and create strength within it.
Yeah, I love that. You guys are bringing the heat today. Really, really appreciate it. We put this slide up last. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And I know if it was left in the two of your hands, we would all be in a better place. So thank you very much. Any closing thoughts you want to throw out there? Again, your time is very much appreciated today. The floor is open to whoever wants to go first. So.
All right, Robert, I'll take this one. I mean, Robert's exactly right about forecasting. I don't think anyone out there that can put out a good forecast. We told our board we're not looking any further than 90 days out because it's just, ridiculous to try to do so. But what I would say about the future, one very strong belief I have about the future is that, if you're constantly looking to the past and reminiscing about when we got to go to restaurants, when we got to go on business trips, when we went to football games and stuff like that, there's no way you're going to see what future is coming at you. And so I think the future, the people who win in the future are those who are looking forward and not calling it a new normal or anything like that, but just looking forward to where the opportunities are coming from, right? As opposed to just constantly thinking about the past, being nostalgic and all that. Yeah, forget about that. eyes wide open, facing forward, see what's coming, and then make adjustments as you need to. Who knows what this world's going to look like, but it's going to look different. And that's how you win the future, is you're able to assimilate that data and take action on it.
I like your perspectives.
I like
I do. What you just said for me is fear and trepidation. If that's your reality, that will be your reality. And look, go back, and there's some graphics out there that you can look on. I found on LinkedIn. But if you look at the pandemics and the epidemics that have happened throughout history, we're experiencing one. They've experienced some bubonic plague, et cetera, you name it. Where are we today? We're farther. All things have continued to push forward. And the bottom line is that, back to the humans are a bell-shaped curve, we'll move through this. And business, you're talking about a disruption, not a decimation. Now, certain industries and things are going to be decimated, but that's a circumstance. It's not the reality of the universe as it sits. Markets are not going to completely disappear. Global trade and things aren't going to disappear. They shrink, which is whatever scares everybody. And then you go, oh my God, the sky is falling. No, it just got smaller. It got a little closer to you, but the universe today is the same as it was before COVID. Today, you have the potential to get a higher probability of dying than you did before, but the universe is still the same. It's going to be the same. And so preparing for the sameness to return is to build on Stevens I agree with him 100%. Look forward, deal with your reality, deal with the pain that it creates, and just move through it. This too shall pass.
Nice. Well, we put this last slide up here, and it's got everyone's contact information. We're going to, again, send this out to everyone. They can have a link to it. Again, it's also on the YouTube channel for Dare Capital. And we encourage you to go look at that or share it with your friends or whatever. If you found this valuable today, go and comment and follow us on the YouTubes and all of the other socials. I did want to mention too that we have an upcoming webinar with the CEO and president and chairman of Keystone Bank on August 4th. He's also a fellow Austinite and fellow EO member as well, Jeff Wilkinson. We're going to be talking about how community banking is going to play its part in the upcoming recovery out of where we are today. So we encourage you to join us for that if that kind of stuff is interesting to you. And once again, thank you guys very much. Casey, thank you for participating and joining in. And Robert and Stephen, you guys were excellent guys to have on. And we really, really appreciate your time. And we will see you next time.
Hey, I want
you guys.
Great to meet you, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say one thing. Yeah, so Stephen's got a full-time job right now. I'm really kind of just playing with things, but if there's help that I can provide to someone that's been on the call, or that, I'm 100% open and willing to have some dialogue about any of these things. So truly don't hesitate to reach out. If I can be valuable to you, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, we do some follow-up with everyone who participated, so we'll make sure we include everyone's contact information. So
that's awesome. Again. I'm calling Robert after this. He's got some really good ideas.
There you go. I love it. All right. Thanks, guys. Everyone have a great day.